Welcome back to my channel. My name is Kate. Today I will be talking about the books that I have read in the first week of August. So it'll be from August 1st through August 7th. So last month I only read 4 books. This first week I have not completed any yet, which does not necessarily bode very well for my monstrous, for me, TBR, which is 13 total books. But I did make a decent amount of progress on the ones that I'm still reading. So hopefully, regardless, I'll make it through most of my TBR this month. So normally what I'll do is I'll talk first about the books that I've completed, which, as I said, is not going to be any for today. Then I'll talk about the books that I'm currently reading, and then last I'll talk about any books that I'm planning to read in the next week. So that's kind of my setup for these. I'm going to be talking about the stuff that I'm currently reading in some detail, which is going to mean some spoilers. I'm going to try and keep it pretty spoiler free, but if you don't want any info on any details on any of the books that I'm going to be talking about, which is going to be The Stand, Senlin Ascends, Dune, and Abhorsen, then feel free to skip this video. I just kind of want to chat about some of my experiences while I'm reading it, so I am definitely going to be talking mild spoilers throughout here. So, since I don't have any completed books, I'll move on to the books that I am currently reading. The Stand is Stephen King's post-apocalyptic classic. It's basically this virus starts infecting people. They call it Captain Trips, but it's got an incredibly high mortality rate. And so the story kind of follows the breakout of the disease and then kind of how people respond to it, and then this big clash between good and evil, basically, is the sense that I have of it. I have this extremely chunky mass market. I think if I end up wanting to keep this for possible rereads, I'm going to trade it out for the trade paperback, which for those who, I think most people are familiar with them, but for those who don't know, they're the floppier paperbacks that are a little bit taller. The mass market of this is a giant pain to read, just because the text is pretty small and it's just a huge brick of a book. But it's been an interesting one so far. I have read a couple Stephen King books before I started this one, so I had read It, which is also pretty chunky, but thankfully I have that one in a trade version. And then I had read The Shining and Dr. Sleep. And I tried The Gunslinger as well. The Stand is already the darkest Stephen King book that I think I've read. Most of the others that I've read have really good characters that they're focused on, and there's kind of some lighter moments. Like, not everything is happy, but it's not just unrelentingly horrifying and depressing. And I know I'm a bit of a scaredy cat and more sensitive to moods like that, so I imagine other people don't find it to be quite as dark as I do. I'm about 20% in, and so far it's basically, he goes through a number of point of views, and it's basically as this Captain Trips virus starts to spread throughout the US, and it's the initial spread of the virus, and then kind of how the government and the military responds to the reports of this virus and people getting sick. It's got a ridiculous transmission percentage, something like 99.4% of people get it, and most of them die. Spoiler alert, I guess. It's tough because King is so good at characters, and sometimes you don't like the people whose heads you're in, and you're not super sad when they die, but many of them are just regular people, just trying to live their lives, and then you'll see this kind of slow progression of them starting to feel under the weather, and then the effect on those around them, and it's just, it's dark, but it's superbly written, so it's also extremely difficult to put down. Um, so far, I think this puts me at roughly 300 pages in, and I'm definitely going to be continuing with this. I don't think there's any chance at this point that I'll DNF it. I'll be curious to see if he maintains this pace as it goes. But so far, I'm definitely enjoying isn't quite the right word for this stand, but I'm compelled. I have a difficult time putting it down, even though it's a little on the rough side. I am glad that I'm reading this a little bit at a time. My goal is basically around 50 pages a day, which I'm pretty much keeping up with, thankfully. So anytime it gets a little too dark for me, then I can turn to something else. Senlin Ascends is basically you're in the viewpoint of Thomas Senlin, who is a headmaster at a small village that he lives in. He ends up going to this famous Tower of Babel during his honeymoon, and Senlin has kind of built up this tower as this really grand expression of what humanity is capable of in his head, and then when he gets to the tower, he ends up losing his wife, and so he basically has to try and find her. So it's basically all about him working his way through the tower trying to find his wife. And as you can tell, I'm already marking this up pretty substantially. I had pretty high expectations for this because a lot of the people whose channels I've been watching, some of whom share book taste with me and some of whom don't, have really loved this book. And I am definitely, it seems like one of those books that you either love it or you hate it. There doesn't seem to be a ton of in between with Senlin Ascends. And I am in the loving it camp. I am having a really good time with this, even though Senlin as a character has me using the phrase bless your heart in basically every way that you can mean it. And I mean that both in the, oh, your heart's in the right place, or the, what are you doing, you idiot, or just the condescending, oh, you tried. Like, all of those senses of bless your heart I have done with Senlin, because he is such a gormless, naive character, but Bancroft does such a good job of giving you these flashbacks with Senlin in his village that he comes from, where he's the headmaster, that kind of give him this sense of a guy who's used to being really introverted, doesn't really know how to interact with other people very well, is way too trusting, and kind of how this being in the tower where nothing is like it seems, everybody's wearing a mask, someone who already struggles with interacting with people and knowing how to read people would be in such a bad situation that, like I said, he's borderline frustrating. I can't believe how much I like him as a character, because normally these kinds of very naive, borderline stupid characters don't appeal to me at all and will ruin a book for me. But for whatever reason, Senlin manages to be naive and foolish and still really sympathetic to me. I also adore the dry humor in this book. It's very understated, but it's made me giggle in a number of places, and I'm really impressed by it overall. I'm thinking I'm going to end up doing a full review of this when I finish it. I'm about 50% into Senlin Ascends now, and I'm having a grand time with it. It's another one that I'm having a hard time putting down. I had planned to finish this book by now. I just have had too many other things going on, so I haven't been able to devote as much time to it as I had wanted to. But I am definitely gonna be ending up If I enjoy the second half as much as I've enjoyed the first half, this will be a pretty highly rated book for me. The next book that I am reading physically is my copy of Dune, which has this awesome Fear is the Mind Killer inset on it. I love this copy so much. It is one of my favorite pretty books. As a heads up, if you have this copy of Dune and you either don't remember much about Dune or haven't read Dune before, do not read the introduction that's in here. The introduction is by his son, Brian Herbert, and it spoils later books in the series. I started reading it to get a sense. I was hoping the son would kind of give me a sense of the author and kind of the set me up for reading Dune, because I basically don't remember anything about the first time I read Dune. And he spoils like 3 books down the line. I get it. I know this is a classic. Everybody's read it. They expect if you're buying the super pretty version that you have already previously read and loved Dune, I guess. I was so mad. Like, come on, man, you really have to spoil this series in the introduction. My memory of Dune from when I was younger was that I thought it was okay. I didn't love it, but I definitely didn't hate it. I was just kind of meh on it in general. Reading this again as an adult, I am so impressed with it. Like, the philosophy is really intriguing. Kind of the world setup, the amount of influences that Herbert was pulling in from all kinds of places. You can kind of see like the classical influence, Middle Eastern influences as well. There's actually a really great YouTube series that tells you not only how to pronounce certain terms and names in the Dune series, but also the origin. As a caveat to that, my understanding is that there's mild spoilers because the origin might come up as important later on in the series, so I will link it in the description, but if you don't want any spoilers for the series, maybe don't watch it. But I thought it was fascinating. Like I said, I'm really liking this. I'm maybe 20% into Dune so far, and I had basically set this book up as my before bedtime reading, and I'm kind of struggling because I end up wanting to read way more of it than I had planned to. My plan, kind of like The Stand, is to read about 50 pages a night, but I just keep wanting to read more of it. So it's not really the best before bed book because I have a hard time putting it down. But I'm really enjoying it. I'm way more intrigued by the world building than I was last time, and I like the kind of slower, heavier intrigue pace of it, in a way that I know I didn't enjoy when I read it in high school before I had read basically any other sci-fi. So I'm, like I said, thoroughly enjoying Dune. I'm definitely looking forward to reading more of that. The only other book that I have going right now is Abhorsen by Garth Nix. And Abhorsen I am doing the audiobook for. I'm only 15% into that. It's definitely the shortest of the 4 books I currently have going, but I also haven't had a lot of time for audiobook recently. It just has been harder to fit into my schedule because I had quit my job and I'm just kind of doing self-study right now. And so I haven't been doing many of the things that I normally would do for audiobook listening. So I'll definitely have some catching up to do on Abhorsen. It's pretty interesting so far. It's a lot darker, bleaker of a start than either Sabriel or Lyriel, and a lot faster. So I'm definitely very curious to see what happens. I can't talk about the plot at all without spoiling the Old Kingdom series, so I won't mention any details, just that it's definitely already more in my range with my preferences than Lyriel was through the whole thing. So I'm definitely looking forward to reading more of that one. As far as what I'm planning on reading next, I have Son of a Lich, which is the sequel to Orconomics. I'll probably have a full review for Orconomics next week. That's one of my planned videos. I'm not sure exactly when yet, but I'll look out sometime next week for that. But Son of a Lich I'm really looking forward to because it picks up right after Orconomics left off. So as soon as I get done with Abhorsen, I'm planning on picking up that book on audio. And then I have, once I get done with Senlin Ascends, I'm going to start Empire in Black and Gold by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This is a buddy read in the Library of Alexandria Discord. It sounds like a ton of people are really enjoying this one, so I'm really hoping I'll end up in that camp as well, but definitely looking forward to that once I get done with Senlin. And then if I have time, which is pretty questionable, but maybe, I just got my copy of Billy Summers by Stephen King, which is his newest book. This is a thriller featuring an assassin main character. I haven't read any King thrillers before, so I really, even though it's going to mean reading 2 Stephen King books at the same time, I really want to get started on this one. So hopefully I'll be able to squeeze this in somewhere. So that is everything I have read, which is nothing, am currently reading, and plan to read in the next week. Hope you guys have been having a good reading month so far, and let me know if there's anything exciting that you want to talk about, or if you've read any of the ones that I'm reading and want to talk to me about them. Always good to talk to you guys. See you later.